Hey guys, check out this podcast done by Muhammad Ali Haji of Behind the Wheel. And he did this fantastic conversation with me recently that he put onto his channel. And he's very kindly given me the video to replicate onto this channel. But do, of course, go and subscribe to him as well. I'll put the links to his channels and social media below. So do that as well. And enjoy this. This is quite an in-depth insight into what makes me tick.
Here's what you can look forward to in today's interview with the brown car guy himself, Shahzad Sheikh.
You know, it needs to be demonstrated that there is a way to achieve goals, but they're not going to come easily. They're not going to come to you while you lie in bed. Get up out of bed, do stuff, fail, do it again, fail again, do it again, fail again, keep doing it, and that's the only way to achieve in life. I wasn't just writing an article because, hey, look, I'm driving a new Toyota Supra, isn't that good for me? No, it's not good for me, it's about you. So the way I've got to communicate, whether it's writing, whether it's a post on Instagram, whether it's a video on YouTube, is I've got to communicate to you. I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to myself. I'm not in a bubble here. Otherwise, what I'm doing is a complete waste of time. When you wanted me to do the dance move and then I sort of dancing off into the distance, and it looks terrible from my point of view. I did it though. I pushed myself, and I knew it would look bad, but I still did it. In retrospect, I'm like, okay, it looks bad, but on the other hand, I'm still happy that I did it, because there's still a piece of fun content that's out there. And it's also a piece of content. Somebody says, oh, can you dance in our next video? I'm like, no, just look at this video. You'll see I can't. I can't do it.
Hello and welcome to the Behind the Wheel podcast, the culmination and brainchild of my own love for cars, but also my determination to ensure that nobody ever goes through what I've been through. That is, hating their 9 to 5 and living only for the weekends. I am so delighted to welcome a man who is the definition of brain plasticity. His ability to adapt, change and learn new things in response to societal trends and the ever-changing needs of his audience, with a commitment and determination to always be of service, is just so inspirational. Shahzad, aka Brown Car Guy, is a multimedia journalist and content creator with 3 decades of practical experience and a proven track record of success in the areas of print, digital, broadcast, video and TV. He is an innovator and early adopter and brings a unique blend of enthusiasm, passion and dedication, as well as humour, to every endeavour he undertakes. My guest for today co-presented a weekly automotive show on Dubai Eye Radio, the UAE's leading talk radio station. He's also run and hosted live events, including a daily panel show at the last 2 editions of the Dubai International Motor Show. Prior to this, he was editor of the Middle East car edition of Car Magazine, was a news editor at UK-based automotive research firm JATO Dynamics, was deputy editor during the reinvention of Used Car Magazine in 2004, and editor of Parkers.co.uk website in 1999, which he launched. Shahzad, Mr. Brown Guy, how you doing, man?
Fine, thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. Fascinating stuff. I didn't know this whole backstory about you, losing weight and all that. How did you do that?
It's crazy. For me, like when I sort of rewind back to say, I don't know, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I was in a job I really hated. And it was so bad that I used to basically sleep and eat a lot, sleep until 4.
Would you care to say what that job was?
It was a job that was very much, it wasn't a place and an area that I just didn't enjoy. And I was doing very kind of menial admin tasks, and I just didn't feel like I was fulfilling my own potential. And but it was so bad that I would literally sleep till 4 p.m. and my wife would come home at about 4:10, and I would literally rush out of bed and pretend like I've been up for the entire day, lie to her, lie to myself. And it was a pretty dark place for me. But in a really kind of bizarre way, I guess, losing weight made me realize that actually, you know what, I'm blaming everyone, but I'm
I'm not looking in the mirror and actually understanding that I am responsible for my life, and I can take control. Hence why I then managed to find a better job. I love what I do now. But I would say about 6 months ago, I went to bed and I was crying. I was actually crying because I was like, man, I love cars. I've always loved cars. And if I don't ever do something about it, am I going to be kicking myself in the foot, when I'm 70 or 80 and wondering, what if I did just tap into it? And so the podcast, kind of the culmination of those two things. And really the mission is to use cars as a magnet. When you speak to young people about, mindset and about empowerment and about accountability, they switch off, right? And so it's about using cars as a magnet to bring them in, and then use people like yourself to inspire, empower, motivate young people to, feel like it's okay to have a side passion. It's not the end of the world if you're doing bad academically. You can still make something of your life. If it's not going so well. Anyways, that's the summarized version, if you like. Yeah.
So sorry to flip this around on you. I know it's supposed to be the other way around, but I do find your story absolutely fascinating, and I think that what you're trying to achieve and the message that you're trying to put out now, I think is truly an inspirational one. And I think the fact that you're not just talking, but you're not just talking, but you're walking the walk. You're actually doing what you're prescribing. I think that's tremendously inspiring, and I think that what you've said is spot on. I think for a lot of people, it needs to be demonstrated that there is a way to achieve goals, but they're not going to come easily. They're not going to come to you while you lie in bed. Get up out of bed, do stuff, fail, do it again, fail again, do it again, fail again. Keep doing it, and that's the only way to achieve in life. That's the only way to do things, and it is pretty much like that. I mean, I've been doing this for well over 30 years now, and I can't say that it's been an easy ride. That would not be honest, and I can't say that I decided one morning I'm going to be a car journalist, and boom, I was a car journalist. No, that didn't happen either. So and along the ways I've encountered numerous successes, but also many more failures. But you have to keep picking yourself up, you're dusting yourself off, and going, what, I'm determined to do this. I may fail doing it. I may fail completely in the wrong one, but I'll never forgive myself if I don't try.
Absolutely. I mean, I want to go back a bit in terms of if those in the car space will probably know who you are, but for those who might not, tell us a little bit about you and what you're about, man.
All right, cool. Oh my God, people always say, "Tell us about yourself," and I'm like, "Oh my God, how do I encompass 30 years of effort into 3 minutes or less?" It's always difficult. I mean, I'm from the UK. I grew up in the UK. I was always into cars. Don't ask me where it came from, because always you ask somebody, where does it come from, and it comes from a dad, or it comes from an uncle, or it comes from living near a garage, or living near a racetrack, or something like that. For me, none of that applies. My dad was never into cars. He only started driving when he moved to Saudi, and he had to. My brother still doesn't drive cars. My kids laugh at my videos. Nobody around me is into cars apart from me. But somehow the overriding, insuppressible passion was always there from day one. When the kids were in the playground playing football, I was at the fence looking at the street, trying to identify all the cars and, looking at the badges and all the rest of it, So it was always there. The other thing I was always interested in, I was interested in science fiction, as you can see from the Enterprise on my shelf back here. But in addition to that, the other great love of mine was writing. So at the time, it was purely writing. I was really into writing. I fancied myself as a writer, as a fiction writer and stuff like that, And at some point, I moved to Saudi for a bit with my dad and decided to stay there. Actually, we all moved over, but we'd come back to studies, and then I decided to move back with him for a bit. And he had access to Saudi Gazette newspaper because his company was supplying them with communication equipment. So whenever he used to go down there, I would tag along because I was just interested. And that got me talking to the features editor, and that got me into a position where I was writing features for them, and that got me into a position where I actually became Saudi Arabia's first motoring journalist.
Wow.
And that, I think, is a fair feat in itself. And I used to say that, categorically without really anything to back it up. But recently interviewed a good buddy of mine, Bakur Azhar, who is Saudi Auto. And he confirmed to me, he's like, no, you were the first one here, even I started after you. So I'm like, wow. So that's where the journey started, and that was pretty much frontiers land, because as you can imagine, most people imagine motoring journalism, you get press cars and you go to events and you go to launches. Of course, starting in Saudi Arabia, there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. I was literally going around to dealers and trying to explain to them why they would want me to write about their cars. It was quite weird scenario. But I managed to do it, and I did it for 2 years, and I drove quite a lot of stuff, including a Lamborghini Countach, which was my first supercar that I reviewed. Yeah, and it was a dream car for a lot of people at the time. Still is, I would say.
It's a poster car, isn't it? It's what you put in your bedroom.
It's not just a poster car. I think it's the ultimate poster car. I think that was the one. That was the car that everybody had on their walls.
Yep.
So that was quite an achievement. Of course, pumped up and all excited with that, success and that enthusiasm, I came back to the UK, and of course it was like a bucket of cold water thrown over me, because I couldn't really get back into that field here, despite my achievements there. So then I just got into local newspapers and stuff like that, and I learned journalism, on the job. So that was actually, it was a setback. This is the thing. I mean, again, we're talking about inspiring young people, and sometimes you'll think, oh man, that's not what I wanted to do, and I've ended up on the wrong track, and this is not fair, and this is not right. But actually, now that I look back at it, between 1992 when I came back and 1997 when I got back into automotive media, so that gap of 5 years or so, I learned the hard graft of publishing. Everything from field reporting to political reporting to covering events to how newspapers were put together to how to deal with dealers to how they were distributed to how advertising worked. Literally, I learned, because it was a small newspaper, we all worked as a small team. So I learned everything. And then I moved into, I worked for an academic organization for a bit. I handled their publications. So I was doing books and journals, leaflets. And again, all of that gives you a solid grounding in the field that I'm in, which of course is media and media publishing at the time. And that of course helped me along my way. But of course, ultimately I was bored out of my head and I did want to get back, and eventually I managed to get back with a digital outlet of EMAP, then called EMAP, now called Bauer. And they were producing the digital versions or the web versions, which was very much early days. It's very much fledgling. This is the late 90s we're talking about, of Car Magazine and Classic Car Magazine. I was with them for about a year and a bit before that whole department folded, because they decided that experiment hadn't worked for them. So that whole digital experiment folded, because it was the early days of digital, and I got an opportunity to move across to Parker's. If anybody knows Parker's, they've been going for many, many years. They're a small consumer used car buying price guide, and they were going to move digital, and I was actually the launch editor on that website, and we went on to win a couple of awards. We were the second biggest website for automotive in the UK after Autotrader. Wow. So you can't really beat Autotrader. At that point, a couple of years in, they also started to cut back. Moved from there to a magazine called Used Car Buyer, reinvented that. We had people like Mike Brewer and Quinton Wilson writing for that. Then reinvented that magazine, relaunched it successfully, but then that got sold. Moved to a company called Data Dynamics, which does automotive intelligence, gathering data from around the world. Managed a team of 48 researchers around the world, feeding into a global news feed. Did that for a year, moved ultimately to something that I really wanted to do, was Car Magazine. I wanted to be the editor of Car Magazine. Now at Parker's, I worked across the floor from Car Magazine. Right. So, I knew a couple of the guys there. But on the other hand, a part of me knew that I would never be made editor of a magazine like that, prestigious, long-running, long-standing magazine like that, over here. So I knew that they were starting to franchise international editions. So I'd always put the feelers out. So when I found out that they were doing one in Dubai, I was like, okay, I want in on that. Yeah. So I applied for that, got that, moved to Dubai in 2006, basically to run that. Yeah. Ended up heading up the, in terms of as editorial director, ended up heading up the entire men's group portfolio magazines with ITP, which was the biggest publisher. It is the biggest publisher of magazines, consumer magazines in Dubai. Did that for about 5 years until the contract ended with Car, which was a shame because we had done a lot of successful stuff with that. Yeah. But we had built up such a big following through our social media feeds, such as Facebook at the time, that there was a demand for us to create our own thing. So we then I co-founded Motoring Middle East, did that right until I left Dubai at the end of 2018. Along the way, I did 6 years of radio on Dubai Eye, and I also did a year as a presenter on a car show for Fox Middle East Network, a car show called The Autocrats. So there you go. That's basically the journey. And then when I moved back to the UK, I decided to basically go freelance and to create my own brand, which is Brown Car Guy. And that's what I've been doing since then.
I find it amazing that you've managed to, despite quite a few setbacks, quite a few tough times, you managed to kind of cling on and maintain your space in this very kind of tough area, I guess. I mean, journalism is tough, but car journalism must be even more tough. At any point, Shahzad, did you think, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to go and get my 9 to 5. I'm going to go into a space where I know I'm going to get paid every single month. I'm going to take the more safer route. And did that thought ever occur to you?
All the time. Still does. Even, especially now, because now I'm trying to make it on my own essentially, right? So I'm freelancing and I'm doing my own thing. So I'm trying to build my own brand and I'm freelancing. And of course, as you can imagine, during the pandemic, you know, a lot of my plans went to hell because it just didn't pan out the way that, you know, because if you think about it, I essentially started doing this at the beginning of 2019, started to get some momentum at the beginning of 2020, and then of course the pandemic hit. And a lot of things that were that were up in the air, there were some balls I was juggling and some projects that were going to happen, and of course that all fizzled out and died. And of course at that point you do think, well, you know, what's the point, you know? And then of course post-pandemic, not that we are post-pandemic, but post-pandemic-ish, you know, things have started to pick up, but they're still not easy. It's still very difficult. So to answer your question, yes, every day. It takes a tremendous amount of willpower, I should say, you know, to pursue your dreams. It's not easy. And that's why I say to a lot of people, a lot of kids do come up to me, especially in Dubai and not so much more recently, but certainly during those times, and they would say, you know, you've got the best job in the world. Okay, I don't disagree with that, but it's not the easiest job in the world. And they're like, how can we do what you do? And first of all, I say, you don't, you know, you shouldn't do what I do because it's not easy. You know, and it's going to be a very, very painful and difficult and trying journey. And you need to be 100% sure that you want to embark down this road, because there are lots of far easier ways of, you know, enjoying your life. You know, you can do what your mama and papa say and, you know, go and become an engineer or a doctor or an accountant or whatever, you know, and you'll earn decent money. And at the end of the day, if it's just cars that you're interested in, if that's it, if that's your own calling, is I'm just interested in the cars, and you think, oh, well, this is a way for me to drive cars. If that's the only reason you're doing it, honestly, I'll tell you, stop right now. I'll say, don't do it. This is not for you. What you need to do is get a job where you earn a lot of money, and then you can buy whatever. You can do the track days. You can go racing. You can, you know, join the gentleman racing club. You can, you know, go on long tours. You know, you can do the stuff that I can't afford to do because of my chosen career path, and you'll enjoy it. What I choose to do, especially at this point in my career, is not so much about the cars. It's about the service that I provide to the audience that I have. You know, and to me, it's always been about that. So the reason why the things that I've done have been so successful, I mean, the reason why, right back to the beginning, I know a journalist now in Canada. His name is Noman. And I did an interview with him as well on my channel. And something amazing turned out from that, which I wasn't aware of. When he was very young, he was living for a while with his family in Saudi Arabia. And he had become aware of my columns at that time.
Wow.
And it's almost like that's something that started him along the journey to where he ended up to.
Wow.
And again, to me, it's like, well, that means that I was doing what I was doing correctly. I wasn't just writing an article because, hey, look, I'm driving a new Toyota Supra. Isn't that good for me? No, it's not good for me. It's about you. So the way I've got to communicate, whether it's writing, whether it's a post on Instagram, whether it's a video on YouTube, is I've got to communicate to you. I mean, I'm talking to you. I'm not talking to myself. I'm not in a bubble here. Otherwise, what I'm doing is a complete waste of time. I'm reaching out to people, and that's how I've inspired them. That's how I've helped them make decisions. At the end of the day, people are making car buying decisions based on this, or they're telling their friends, or they want to appear like then they are knowledgeable and passionate because they've listened to the Brown Car Guy or whatever, and they've learned from him. So one of the things that you must realize before you embark down this road is that there is a tremendous amount of responsibility. It's not just about, oh, it's going to be fun going to press events and driving cars and that's what it's all about. It's not. That's not what it's about. Because if that's what it's about, then really you shouldn't be doing this. What it's about is about enabling, informing, and helping other people. I get questions all the time. People are DMing me and all this sort of stuff. And I always try to answer them. I always try as much as I can in my capacity. I will always try to guide. I don't know who they are, but I will try. I will guide. I will try and find out what they're after. If I have the information, I will provide it. If not, I'll try and point them in the right direction. And I think that's what this is all about. You know, there's got to be a driving force behind what you're doing. And like you talk about the setbacks, it's like, yes, of course, every day do you think, well, why am I doing this? And every time somebody, you bump into somebody on the street, says, oh, brown car guy, I saw your stuff. Or somebody says, oh, I bought that Dodge Charger because I saw your review. Every time something like that happens, you're like, I know why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
I remember why I'm doing this.
Yeah, yeah. That is profound, because I think a lot of people focus so much on the money, and they think that money is the thing that will give them the happiness they're after. But I think for you, what you're saying is that it's not about the money per se. It's about giving. It's about being of service and actually making sure that you are giving as best a possible service to people and feeling like you are helping people. And that seems so clear in your videos, and whatever you do is that you're trying to entertain people, you're trying to inform them. To what degree, Shahzad, has that been the main driving factor behind your audience and your success so far?
100%. I think it's everything. You just take. So you look at what I did with Car Magazine. So again, it was fun. If you think about moving to the Middle East in 2006, there was a ton of magazines at that time, especially in Dubai. But even the standard of photography was not very good. I was blowing ITP's budget every month because at one point early on, I couldn't find any local photographers that were good at shooting cars, and everybody had excuses. It's too hot. It's too bright. The sun is too sharp. Get over it. I was flying photographers from the UK to Dubai in order to raise, because what I had established was that I have Car Magazine. Now, as per the contract that we had with Car, it's a franchise edition, it's a licensed magazine. And so the requirement that there was, I believe if I remember correctly, was a 35% minimum content that you had to use from the UK edition, right? But you could use up to 90%, or I think it was 85 or 90% content from the UK. So I could just cheat. I could just have a laugh, enjoy myself, take all the UK content, cut and paste, bang, bomb, out there, no problem, and do my job, my 9-to-5 job. Yeah. But that's not what I was about. So when I went out there, I said to the publisher, I said, can you give me all the research that you've done on the magazine? And he was like, what research? And I'm like, the demographics, the audience. He said, we haven't done anything, we just got the license. I'm like, okay. So then what I instigated was that I got involved in the car communities. I went out, I went to car events, I met people, I spoke to people, I manned, the first year we were at the motor show, we had a big stand, I manned it all 7 days because I wanted to talk to people. And I wanted to understand what the local culture was, how they spoke about cars, what cars turned them on, what cars didn't, how did they approach. So I wanted to get into the local psyche. I knew about cars, but cars are different all over the world. And the way the car culture is different all over the world. So you have to understand that. So I got to a point where I started talking their language. I started being relevant to them. I started, even the stuff that I was taking from the UK magazine, I was heavily editing. People think, oh, it's a cut and paste job. It wasn't. I would heavily re-edit those articles to suit the Middle East market, to make it relevant to them, right? And at some point, I remember distinctly one time I got a message. We had a liaison editor at EMAP Bauer in the UK that would basically manage all of the international editions. And at one point he sent me an email. He said, Shahzad, you've dropped to less than 20% UK content in your last issue, which is a breach of the contract, in fact, And I said, yeah, because the UK content was rubbish and it wasn't relevant to my audience. And then fair play to him, he emailed me back. He said, no problem. and he got it. And the thing was that we were doing, like, we were shooting local cars, putting local covers. One of the things I realized early on is, like, the magazine isn't localized until people can see that the car is in the Middle East. So we were going to great expense to shoot those covers locally. Every now and then we would use a UK cover, but we try and do our own. It got to a point where And again, this is the thing of prestige, that the franchise editor, the liaison editor, told me that to get other franchises around the world, the sales team would take 2 magazines to show people how it was done. One was Car Russia and the other one was Car Middle East, because these to them were the examples of how, the perfect way of how to doing a franchise edition of the brand. To me, I was not just looking after the car brand, which is an important brand. You know, it's a prestigious magazine brand. And to me, I was the caretaker. So I was trying to ensure that I was keeping to the same quality standards and style of content as Car, but I was equally aware of the importance of my audience. So take, for example, a simple thing like Car Magazine here in the UK, or Evo Magazine here in the UK, and they do a lot of supercars and high-end cars and stuff like that. You can rightfully agree with me that probably 80 to 90% of the audience of that magazine will probably not own those cars. Mm-hmm. You know, to them, they're aspirational cars. Mm-hmm. So they're basically they're living that dream by proxy through the writings of the journalists, yep. Right? So in some ways, you could kind of pull the wool over their eyes because they'll never experience those cars. One thing that I realized very quickly when I moved to the UAE was that it's probably the other way around. Probably 80% of my audience could buy the cars I was talking about.
Okay.
So suddenly I became very, very aware of the fact that I had to treat them. I could not patronize my audience. I had to treat them like equals. You know, because they were probably, if I was reviewing a Porsche 911 Turbo, the guy who picked up the magazine had probably owned 3 of them. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So I have to be, and he's probably like, oh, but you didn't mention this and you didn't mention that, and
that is so interesting. Oh my god.
So you have to put yourself into the reader's shoes. Now, because of that, now you talked about how much that impact the audience that I had, and then we started Car Meets, is something that we initiated, cars and coffee type culture. We started with 25 cars at, I think it was Fatburgers in Jumeirah Beach Road, and our penultimate meet, we had basically blocked out the entire festival city with over 1,000 cars in attendance. You know, and that culture came from, you know, people bought into what I was doing and how I was doing it, and they enjoyed it. They related to it. They could understand what I was saying. They could, I was speaking their language. I was using the terminology. When I say language, not Arabic, I mean like in terms of terminology and phraseology. Yeah. So they could understand it. They could relate to me, and I think that's important. I think that's very important, is the ability to relate to your audience, because that's how you make that connection. And once you make that connection, that's when you get people to come along with you on this fantastic ride.
I think what's amazing is that obviously you've had experience both in the print world, but also your amazing success in the social media space as well, in the digital space, if you like. How, in your view, how are the two different in terms of, you know, writing for a magazine versus social media? How is that different for you, and how have you kind of targeted or trained yourself to change how you write and what you say depending on the medium that you're using?
So I'm going to have a little bit of a go at my contemporaries in response to that question, because, you know, as I said, I've been doing this a long time. I did start in a print environment, so I am essentially basically at my core a print journalist. And when I started doing this in 1989, the newspaper was still being pasted up. So they would still, like, you know, you would cut it out and paste it up on a board, and that would go, and then you'd get, you know, so this was really old school when it started. This was even before desktop publishing. But all along my journey, one thing has always been clear to me. I don't know anything, right? This is the one mindset I think a lot of people forget, particularly senior people, and particularly people who have done, you know, maybe done 5-10 years, whatever, in their careers. They start to think they know stuff. They start to think they know everything. And the moment that happens is the moment you start to stagnate. The moment you think you know it all is the moment that you don't know it all. And I've always said, I don't know and especially when you come to the digital environment, everything changes and is changing constantly. Yep. You know, I spend a lot of time reading articles and watching videos watching videos with little kids in them explaining to me how to do Instagram.
Yeah.
But I'm watching them because I'm learning stuff from them, you know. They may be 16, 17 years old, but I'm learning stuff from them. So I'm trying to keep up to date, you know. So I think one of the important things, and you say that transition is extremely difficult. And I think a lot of my fellow journalists and colleagues from back in the day have not been able to make that transition. They've not been able to do it because they've been stuck in their ways. They've been like, no, print is the way, you must read. And, you know, yes, okay, it's the way. But here, take for example, I was doing some research recently. I believe, if I may be incorrect, but, you know, just bear with me. If you can go and double check the figures, but from what I remember from the recent research I did, Car Magazine in the UK, magazine sales per month in 2020 was less than 40,000 circulation. Less than 40,000. Let me put that into context. When I was working for Parker's back in at the end of the 90s, circulations for magazines were like that were in the hundreds of thousands.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
Top Gear, I believe, if I remember correctly, was in the 6 to 700,000 bracket.
Wow.
And Max Power was even more than that. Max Power, long defunct magazine. So that was the level of magazine circulation we were talking about. And if something, and for a company like EMAP or now Bauer, if a magazine dropped below 80,000 sales, they would shut it because there wouldn't be any point. Now we're talking about magazines that are selling less than 40,000 copies. You can see what's happened to the market. So the whole concept of like, oh no, you must stick to print and we must, people must read. It's like you can write it fine. I still write. I write for a lot of magazines and newspapers. I still do it. But at the same time, you've got to be flexible. You've got to understand new markets. And it's not just a case of going, okay, I think I've decided to open a Facebook page or an Instagram account, or I'm going to start a YouTube channel. That's not enough, because you've got to understand how that works. You've got to understand the language. You've got to understand how people consume that. And it's all very different. I mean, people talk about, you've seen my car review videos on YouTube, but as I mentioned earlier, I've done car reviews for television.
Yeah.
Now, having worked with the TV team at the Autocrats in Dubai, we used to start, when we did a day's filming, we used to start pretty much at dawn, and we would end pretty much when there was no more light left to shoot.
Wow.
And sometimes that meant 50 plus degrees in the desert, wearing a tie and a tweed jacket, because that's what the director had envisaged. It was a long, hard slog. And it's not that I'm messing up my lines or anything like that. I do sometimes, but generally I'm pretty good. But it's because it's TV, and the TV, they want to try this angle, they want to try that angle, can we just do that take again? Can we just do it this way? Can we just do it that way? Many, many different ways. And that works for television. Then you've got to understand that the YouTube is not television. There's no point putting that amount of effort into a YouTube video, because the consumption of the audience that's consuming YouTube is different to the audience that has expectations of what they want to see on TV. So that's what I mean by interpreting your media platform and your audience expectations correctly. And that's a moving target in both of those cases. It's a constantly moving target. So if you're not keeping up with that, you're going to be left behind. So one of the things about me is that I've always, I've tried everything. Some things work, some things don't. I've done podcasting, as you know. I've done videos, I've done Facebook, I've done Instagram. Like when we were doing Motoring Middle East, which is what I founded after Car Magazine, and this would have been 2011 onwards. So 2011 to say 2015 or so, Facebook was massive for us. Like we could not fail. We were growing massively. Like we had spent a lot of money invested in a website because we decided not to go print. We were going to be purely digital. We'd spent a lot of money setting up a website. After a couple of years, we pretty much gave up with the website because we realized our audience had moved. Yeah. So we're like, why are we focusing on here when our audience is over here? You've got to react. You've got to be prepared to react, You can't just be a stick in the mud going, no, I've spent, this much money on my website and I'm going to do that. No. Where is the audience? Go there. So we moved to Facebook, and then, but even after 5 years, we found that Facebook traffic was trailing off. Where was it now? It was on YouTube. Okay, so we moved to YouTube, and since I moved back here, I have a Facebook page, I have a website, I have Instagram, I have YouTube, but my focus is YouTube and Instagram. Yeah. Because I know that that's where the majority of the traffic, particularly because people over here use Twitter a lot. People in the Middle East use Twitter a lot. But as a car journalist, Twitter is not necessarily where I want it to be, particularly in the Middle East. Here it's a little bit different. In the UK, people do use Twitter quite a lot. But in Twitter in the Middle East is a political platform. So there's a lot of political dialogue, political chatter on Twitter. So we never really focused on it. So that's why I never really focused on it. I have a Twitter account, but I didn't really focus on it. So it's all about, and that just boils down to, again, understanding where is your audience and understanding which is the right platform to reach them on. And it's a constantly moving target. What I'm doing today may not be relevant in 6 months. I might have to change again. Yeah. But you've got to be ready to do that.
I think it's such a fundamental question, isn't it? Where are the eyeballs? And then being willing to change and adapt your place of focus depending on where the eyeballs shift, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, and also really importantly, as you said, Shahzad, was also then
changing the way that you deliver your content based on that platform. You can't just take a Facebook post and copy and paste it into Instagram, and you can't just take an Instagram post and copy and paste the text into Twitter. It ain't gonna work. They are very different in the way that they deliver content. And I think often people find themselves so emotionally invested in one particular platform that they become so adverse to changing, and it's really sad to see, and that's what leads to failure, I guess. And like you said, the moment that you think you know it all is the moment that you then start going downhill.
Yeah.
I want to ask a real fundamental question. There are people out there who they've got an interest in something, they want to give it a go, but there's something that prevents them from picking up that phone, right, holding it to their face and saying hello or doing something. And so this is way before we're talking about the importance of being able to shift your level of focus from Instagram to Facebook. This is like before all that. That starting point for someone to say, I'm going to put something out there. What do you think prevents people from doing that, number one? And number two, did you ever go through that point where you were quite scared about what people might think about what you're putting out there?
Yes, I mean absolutely. It's quite funny that if you find any of my childhood friends now, and you ask them about the brown car guy and the Shahzad Sheikh who is out there now, they're like, we don't recognize this guy.
Wow.
Because again, it's not just been a case of me learning new skills and reinventing how I deliver my content and stuff like that. It's been a case of me reinventing myself constantly throughout, and I was a very shy person. I was very timid and shy.
It's so
I
hard
know.
to believe. I mean, that is just gobsmacking. I don't understand that. I mean,
if my 12-year-old or 13-year-old self would have seen me, hosting live events every day, 3 shows a day at the Dubai Motor Show, and getting some of the crowds into a frenzy because we were doing car of the year and stuff like that, they would have said never. They would have said no way would I ever evolve into that person. Now there are two or three things to this. Now, first of all, you said what prevents people from doing that thing. Now, first of all, it is fear, and it's a self-awareness, which is very important. We all need to be self-aware, but some of us are too self-aware and too self-conscious. And if you're too self-conscious and you're literally everything you do is like, oh, but so what will so-and-so think? What will so-and-so say? And especially in our culture,
yeah.
Oh,
Absolutely.
what are they going to say, and what will auntie say, and what will uncle think? All this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And you will bring shame on us, and if you get stuck up in that, then you know what? Just go become the accountant, just become the engineer, just become the doctor, just go do that. Because that's where everybody will be like saying good things about you.
And you'll find a wife.
I mean, and you'll find a wife as easily as well. I had until a long time in my career, right up till the late 20s or something like that, people would be saying, what do you do, beta? And I'd be like, I try to explain what I'm doing. I try. And at the end of they'd be nodding, and you could see none of it is going in. And you're nodding and nodding. It's like, very nice, beta, but when are you going to get a proper job?
I would have loved to be a fly on that washer side to see that.
But that's the sort of thing that happens. And that's fundamental. So before you even talking about picking up the phone or doing a YouTube video or talking to a live audience, you've got to just even overcome that. You've got to overcome within, even like I said, I was right at the beginning. I joked with you. I said, my kids take the mickey out of my video. They do. So does my wife. But does that stop me? No. Because, at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, but I'm not creating this content for you. I'm creating it for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got to see what they want, and I've got to see what they like, and I've got to do that. It's a difficult hurdle. And for a lot of people, it's a hurdle they will never be able to overcome. I mean, I have done lots of interviews with lots of people. I know some people, it's a rare example, but I know some people where this has happened, where, off the camera or off the environment, you speak to them and they're smart, they're savvy, they're witty, they're funny. And then you turn on a camera, bang, gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Totally self-conscious, can't say a word, frozen. It's happened. I've seen it happen. You've got to be aware of whether you're that person or not. And if you are that person, but you're still determined and you're still passionate and you have the drive, then you've got to push yourself. And you've got to put yourself in environments where typically you would never be comfortable.
Yeah.
You've got to put yourself in front of that camera. You've got to put yourself in front of that audience. You've got to, you've got to literally stand up in front of people and do stuff. And, and if you are, I would say even if you find that you get a panic attack or an anxiety attack or you're sweating and stuff like that, don't give up, because that's the first time, right? Okay, if 50 times later that's still happening, then maybe you need to think of a different career. But, we all have that. I mean, I still have that. I have to still, I fluff my first couple of takes on a YouTube video because I'm still self-conscious, and then I have to snap into it, I'm a little bit shaky when I go onto stage, and I've done a lot of stage stuff, and but, after a while, I'm in it. It's one of those things. It's not a bad thing to be nervous, to be self-conscious, to be self-aware. But it's the ability to understand that you've got to get past that. And it's the ability to be aware of the fact that the only person who's really aware of those aspects of you are you.
Yeah. Yeah.
The audience out there doesn't really care. They don't know. What they're seeing is what they're seeing. And they're either going to like you or they're going to hate you. And if they're going to hate you, so what?
Yeah.
So what? What difference does it make? I mean, very, very early on when we started doing videos, we did... this must have been back in 2011, and we started doing some video content even for Car Magazine at the time. And me and my deputy editor, Imtishan, we took out a couple of muscle cars. We had a Camaro and we had a Mustang, and we took them out into the desert, and we did a little video with those cars. And we uploaded this video, and we got so much hate. And a lot of it racist hate, as you can imagine. You can go, what are these towel heads in the Middle East? They hate us, but they love our cars. And what do they know about cars? And why didn't they go back to driving rickshaws? And, all this sort of stuff, And you think, well, for some people, the first time that happens, that will stop them dead in their tracks. They'll be like, oh, okay, I don't want this. I don't like this. I can't handle it. I'm not going to do it. For me, as you can see, 10, 11 years later, I'm still making videos. I'm like, well, whoever commented on that video, you're still stuck in your little room being nasty to people on the internet. I'm making videos, and look at all the videos I've made. Do you know what I mean? I'm still doing it. So you've got to look at the longer picture. You've got to look at the bigger picture, and you've got to think that, there will be hate, there will be criticism, sometimes from within your own family and your own friends, but you've just got to get past that. That's if you have that drive and that passion. But if you find that is too difficult a hurdle to get over straight away, then you need to stop. I mean, like I was, chatting to a dear friend of mine, and I was saying, he knows a lot about design and stuff like that. I said, oh, you should do it. You should do a video. You should do a YouTube channel. And he said, Shahzad, that's not me. And I respect that. I respect that. I mean, not everybody who has that knowledge and that ability, it doesn't mean that they can't, share it and spread it out, but it means that maybe their platform or their avenue or their way of doing it will be different to how I do it, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they can't do it. It just means that they might choose to only do it behind the written word, or behind the picture caption, rather than, being up front in your face sort of thing, which is what I do. So I think it's all is not lost if you can't, pick up a phone and do a video on it. But it's a difficult thing. It's the very first hurdle to try, And I think there's a media guru you're probably familiar with, does a lot of content, guy called Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
And and I think a lot of what he says is right, because you talk about people like, oh, but will I be good? Will the quality be okay? Will the sound be okay? He said, look, just do it. If the content is good, then people will start watching, right? That's all you need. All you need nowadays. And we live in an incredible world. When I started out doing this, I had to make friends with the features editor at the Saudi Gazette to have a chance to write content that would be published before anybody had a chance of seeing it. Right? I had to overcome those hurdles to even be seen or read or heard or whatever. Now everybody has one of these, and everybody anywhere in the world can upload content, and it can instantly, it won't necessarily, but it could instantly be seen by millions of people potentially. The opportunity is there.
Absolutely. I think there's two things that you have just said that really got me thinking. I think number one is people are way more malleable than they think they are. I mean, you mentioned there about if your younger self would have seen you now, they probably wouldn't recognize you. And it just goes to show that, people, when people say, oh, you know what, it's okay for Shahzad because that's who he is. He is that guy. but in actuality, you've become that guy. It wasn't you when you were born, and it wasn't you when you were younger. You've become who you are as a result of shaping yourself, and that is really, really interesting. I know, because people often use that as an excuse, as a reason to not do that video or whatever it is, because they're like, well, it's just not me. And number two, which I think is which is so reassuring, Shahzad, is even you, the one who is so confident in front of a camera, even still finds himself going through periods of a bit nervous. You might not get it right first time.
Yeah.
And if that's not a reason to give things a go, then I don't know what is. Which is just interesting.
And that's natural, and it's healthy, and it's almost like if you don't have it, then there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Because it's the same. It's a bit like what I was saying earlier. It's the point at which you think you know everything is the point at which you're going to stagnate. The point at which you are so cocky and so confident that you are not getting nervous is the point at which you are going to make a mistake.
Yeah.
At which you are going to say something or make a blunder or something. Something dramatically is going to go wrong. It's very important to be self-conscious and self-aware and be aware of who you're talking to, how you're talking to them, and how you're addressing people. It's very important. That's all part of it.
Would you say that you're now comfortable with being uncomfortable, if that kind of makes sense?
I like that. That's very good. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, obviously there are certain things that I just can't do, that I've tried. For example, I did some content with a buddy of mine, another very senior journalist here in the UK. I guess him and me are kind of pioneers, him even more so, because I think he was pretty much the first black motoring journalist in the UK, and we've known each other a very long time. And before the pandemic, we were doing some content together, and we did a few videos together. And one of the videos, I think it was the Kia Soul. Mm-hmm. So the Kia Soul, we were doing a review of that, and it was his idea to let's introduce soul music. Let's do this because it's Kia Soul, right? Let's introduce some music. And I said, yeah, sure, cool, let's do that. So we did that, and we did some fun stuff. The trouble is, he's a terrific dancer. I'm not. I don't just have two left feet. I have two right feet as well. It's ridiculous, and I'm completely hopeless. And the end sequence, he wanted to show me a dance move, and he wanted me to do the dance move, and then us sort of dancing off into the distance, And it looks terrible from my point of view, I did it though. I pushed myself, and I knew it would look bad, but I still did it, Yeah. In retrospect, I'm like, okay, it looks bad, but on the other hand, I'm still happy that I did it, because there's still a piece of fun content that's out there. And it's also a piece of content. Somebody says, "Oh, can you dance in our next video?" I'm like, "No, just look at this video. You'll see. I can't. I can't do it." But it's one of those things. If some people say to me, I get messages quite often now. Why don't you do your content in Urdu or Hindi, right? And again, that's a bit of a hurdle for me, because my Urdu and Hindi is terrible, absolutely atrocious, and I wouldn't want to inflict it on anyone. And it's one of the things where I'm not comfortable speaking that in a public environment. So again, it's one of those things where even I have certain obstacles and certain blocks and certain hurdles which I have not been able to get over. I mean, if somebody said, I'll give you $1 million to do a video in Hindi, then I probably would get over that hurdle pretty quickly. I think, but otherwise, it's something that I've not been able to do. And I always say to people, look, no, really, I can't do it. I wouldn't be comfortable doing it. I wouldn't do it right. And I think there are better people. And this is the other thing you've got to recognize. I think there are better people doing it in that language, and there is content out there. So there's no point in me trying to do it. I wouldn't be able to compete with them. So, it's one of those things where we're not all perfect, but we all try to evolve, we all try to better ourselves, we all try to learn new skills, and I think that's very important.
I think that's such a key point there, and I think, where do you personally draw that line between crossing into that kind of uncomfortable zone, but also being self-aware of what you can and what you can't do? I mean, does that shape a lot of how you approach your decisions and where you put your time in?
I think so. I think that you also have to look at it the flip side. Like I said, I also have to look at the value of doing it. Because if I'm going to put myself in an uncomfortable position and do something, I'm like, what's the value of it? First of all, does it work for the content? Mm-hmm. Is it relevant? Is it funny? Is it entertaining? Is it relevant? So with the Kia Soul, the idea Kevin had was brilliant. He was like, okay, it's the Kia Soul. Let's do something, with soul music. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. Even though, I knew I don't know if this is gonna work, but I'm like, but still, I'm like, okay, it's relevant. It works. Secondly, I've got to think of the audience. Would the audience like it? Will it work for the audience? You know, because we could have a great old time and produce some fun and have a laugh, minute producing this content. But if everybody's like, oh, that was a bit naff, really, then I'm like, well, why did we do it?
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to do it in order to know it. You won't know. Yeah, you won't know that until you do it, right? So. And thirdly, you've got to look at the time value proposition. I mean, people say to me, you put out a lot of content and you do a lot of stuff. So sometimes you've got to start to think of, okay, right, what's my return on terms of the value that I'm putting in, or the time, effort, and energy that I'm putting into something? What's the value return on that? And by value, I don't necessarily mean money. I mean, necessarily, am I reaching an audience? Am I getting impressions? Am I getting traffic? Is it working? Is it something that will generate more videos or more content? So you have to sort of weigh everything up and go, right. So that's why it boils down to what we said earlier about learning what is happening constantly, knowing that it's a moving market, and being ready to make that transition if necessary, and to move to something else. And it's the same with experimentation. You experiment, it may work, it may not. I've done a lot of unique pieces of content on Instagram or YouTube which I've tried, and then I've just stopped it. Because it's like I've done a few of them and I'm like, nah, it didn't really work. Okay, fine. I'm not going to cry about it. I'm going to. The wonderful thing about the internet is that you will know instantly if it's working or not. And then if it's not working, you just go, right, I'll stop that. I'll do something else now. And that's fine. But it's one of those things where sometimes you have to push yourself into that uncomfortable position to know that. But the flip side of this is the fact, especially in the digital environment, people recognize authenticity. They recognize honesty. And at some point you get to a stage where if you're trying to push yourself, it's okay to put yourself in an uncomfortable position as long as you're still true to your identity. But if you're ending up in a position where you're doing something that's just not you, then people will see through that pretty quickly. And not only that, but you just won't be able to do it. So at that point you'll be like, that's not me. Why am I doing that? It's not me. So I think that's where you could draw the line.
So important, because one thing that's just struck me is I've watched quite a few of your YouTube videos, and speaking to you now, there's not a massive difference between the person you are on the video and the person you are in front of me right now. And to me, that just points towards your genuine authenticity and the fact that you're not trying to be the next Jeremy Clarkson. You're just trying to be yourself, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think this is why because there was a lot of, especially even amongst my contemporaries and my friends and maybe even family, eyebrows raised when I went with the brown car guy title. And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, because it is who I am. It is my identity. Not that I have a brown car. Let's get that out of the way straight away, because that's a first. A lot of people come up to me. It's like, do you only have brown cars? I'm like, no. There should technically be a comma after brown, so it's brown car guy. So it's like that. But to me, it's one of those things where I was like, okay, it hasn't been easy as a brown guy in this industry, particularly in the UK. In the Middle East, I achieved great successes, but in the UK, I achieved not so many. And I thought, you know what, I'm not going to, change myself. I'm not going to change my identity. I'm not going to try and be somebody I'm not. I'm going to be defined. I'm going to double down on my identity, and I'm going to say, this is who I am. This is what I am. And it's okay to be brown and to be passionate and knowledgeable about cars, because this is the other thing, is sometimes, particularly here in the UK, it's quite cliquey and people are quite blinkered about the car world and the car community, and they think, only we know about cars because we've been building them since forever. It's like, no guys, you haven't been out of your shell. You are stuck in the old days. You haven't been to the Middle East. You haven't seen the Kuwaiti kids who can tell you, the cubic capacity of any American car from the 60s, right? You haven't seen the Palestinian girl who is a drift queen in the UAE, who can drive better than any of these guys. You haven't seen the fact that people are mad about Volkswagen Beetles in Pakistan. You haven't seen. You don't know these cultures. It's very blinkered to think that you know everything. You don't. There's so much out there that you've got to learn and you've got to be aware of. And I think that one of the things you've got to be aware of is that people have their identity and they should be true to their identity.
Oh, it's so important because I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I find it amazing that someone like yourself is creating YouTube videos, and you're obviously brown and you're proud of it and you're being true to who you are. It's so easy to kind of think, you know what? I'm gonna try and fake it to be someone else, and that's just that. I think people are a lot more intelligent than we think they are in that sense, and trying to take shortcuts and trying to be inauthentic is only going to get you so far. I think it's so valuable there. So obviously, apart from being true to who you are, not feeling so scared about what people will say, but also really importantly, putting the audience at the center of everything you do, and really trying to make sure that you are targeting your specific audience, and providing as much value to them as possible. Is there anything else that you use as your sort of guiding principles, that you would encourage people to bear in mind, should they choose to start doing YouTube videos or social media?
I think you've summed it up quite well there. I mean, authenticity, awareness of audience, awareness of your platform, and a certain level of knowledge, is obviously important. I mean, I can't, I couldn't fake what I do. I've always been into cars. Since I was a kid, I was reading car magazines and car books. So and I don't have the greatest memory, so I don't remember facts and figures, but I know a lot of stuff which I've accumulated over the years. I've also had a lot of experience. I've driven just about everything. I mean, I'm at a point now where the driving aspect is not something that that intrigues me that much anymore, because before I drive a car, I pretty much know what it's going to drive like, because I've driven so much, So and if there's a surprise, and that's what makes the car interesting, actually, if it actually surprises me, and you'll see that in the videos where if a car does surprise me, I'm like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. But so I think all of those things are very important. The final thing, I think, is just a determination, a self-belief. I think that's very important. It's the ability to go, no, I do have something to offer. I am of service. I can contribute. And I think that one thing, and again, this chimes with what Gary Vee often says, is the legacy aspect of it. And I think that. And then particularly, and this is a bit more of a somber turn to this discussion, I'm apologizing for that in advance, but particularly in the last 12 months, 18 months or so, we've all lost a lot of people, we've all lost friends and family and stuff like that. And one of the things that hits home when that happens is you realize, how fleeting life can be. How humans have been here for, long time, and suddenly a single life can come and go in an instant, especially when somebody's too young leaves, and I've had a couple of people like that I've lost recently, and you just go, then you just realize, like, well, what have they left behind? And I think that traditionally in our culture, we always think, oh, but we've left children behind, and we've left, khandan behind, and, we've left a business behind. But I think that doesn't really apply anymore, because I've seen even those things erode, I mean, it's like once you've forgotten your grandfather, who's going to remember him after you? Nobody, because that's gone now. There's a rolling. I don't remember my great-great-grandfather. I have no idea who that was. No inkling of it. I'm sure my dad did, but I don't.
Yeah.
I can remember. I can just about remember my grandfather, but that's it. And then when I'm gone, my kids won't know who my grandfather was. So you lose that. And you think, well, how can you make your mark? How can you leave a part of yourself behind? And I think what the wonderful thing about this new world that we live in, with this digital environment and the digital media format that we have, is part of us lives on.
Yeah.
One of the things I did when my father passed away about 7 years ago, I think it was now, or so, is that I dug out all of his old photos, and I created an album, and I put them onto Facebook. And to me, it was I did that for myself, and a lot of people liked it because there were these amazing pictures from the 50s and 60s, But I did it because I thought, a part of him is going to live on now, because that's always going to be there, right? If somebody looks for it, it'll always be there. So so in some sense, that's kind of achieving a subtle kind of a mortality, if you like, and a kind of legacy. So it goes back to what I'm saying before. So I think that's another thing, is a desire to stand out, a desire to do something different, a desire to leave something behind, a desire to make your mark and say, guys, I was here. It might have been 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, but I was here, and some people remember that. And I think that if I am remembered, long after I'm gone, I'll be like, wow, that will be something. I think that would be the ultimate achievement.
Well, just on that point, and it's such a great transition, because I always ask my guests this one final question, Shahzad, is, what would you want your legacy to be?
I think the legacy again is somebody that always tried to do something, but also always looked after his audience. I think that's very important. I think always looked after his audience, always tried to be genuine, always tried to be helpful. You know, at the end of the day, you know, we live in a world which is very difficult. As much as I've just, you know, extolled the virtues of the digital media and the internet and all the rest of it, but we also know it to be quite divisive and destructive as well. You know, and we've actually seen examples of that quite recently. And I think that it would be wonderful to be remembered as somebody that ensured that that wasn't the case, was trying to do the opposite, was trying to, you know, spread, you know, okay, yes, my context is automotive, but my message is still like to try and entertain, to try and inform, to try and help, to try and encourage. That's always the message, whatever the subject matter is. I think that the greatest content creators are always trying to do that, and I think that's very relevant. So I think that if people remember, it's like, you know, I don't mind if I go tomorrow, but if people say, yeah, but you know, he was fun and he was good and I really enjoyed his content, I'll be like, that's good enough.
Yeah, yeah, it's such an amazing place to end. Just finally, for those that want to find you online, where can they find you?
Well, it's very easy. You just type in Brown Car Guy to Google or any search engine, and you'll just find a page or two of just me. You know, but I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. # Brown Car Guy, browncarguy.com, YouTube. Search Brown Car Guy. It's very, very simple.
Fantastic, Shahzad. Honestly, without disrespecting my other podcast guests, this has probably been the most fun interview I've ever had. So thank you so much for coming onto the podcast today. I really do appreciate your time, and I can't wait to see the future of Brown Car Guy.
Yeah, me neither. Thank you so much. It's been fantastic. I much appreciate it. Thank you. A big thank you to my top tier patron and sponsor, Jay Williams over Air Technic. Check out their shop for brakes, exhaust, body kits, and of course, suspension. Plus, thanks to Muhammad Ali Haji and Tom Conway Gordon, who are both tier 4 patrons. And of course, all of these guys for also subscribing to my Patreon account and contributing so much towards helping me to continue creating this content. Join them over at patreon.com/Brown Car Guy. And of course, make sure that you are subscribing, liking, and sharing this channel. Hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any of my videos. And also, check out browncarguy.com and follow me on all social media channels. Just search for my hashtag, which of course is #BrownCarGuy.